The Denver Broncos added a starting defensive tackle to their lineup in NFL free agency. How will he make the Broncos defensive line better this season? We'll dive deep into that here on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into a brand new episode, Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. To all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country, thank you so much for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day every single day. Just a reminder, you can get this show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. So do us a favor, hit that subscribe or that follow button down below so you never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team from an objective point of view. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter from Mile High Sports, joined alongside, as always, by Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com. You and I have said it going into this offseason here, Sayre, that the biggest weakness that this Broncos team has at a position that's not named quarterback is the defensive line. George Paton agreed with us at the NFL Scout and Combine, saying that he believed that they had to be better against the run here. Well, now that was one of the moves that we were anticipating. What are they going to do to bolster the defensive line to get better there? Well, they go out there and they sign a former New Orleans Saint. They signed a former, now trending Texas Longhorn, which seems to be the new trend here for the Broncos in terms of players that they might be interested in signing. But on top of that, they're getting a young player who can produce, who can stop the run at an effective rate, which the Broncos desperately need.
And not just an effective rate, but according to Pro Football Focus, the highest run stop rate in the NFL at nearly 18% last season. Malcolm Roach only played 290 snaps for the Saints this past season, but get this, 23 run stops. That's stops that constitute a failure for the opposing team. 23 run stops in under 140 run snaps. So we're talking about efficiency, and the Broncos are not necessarily paying for, you know, like you said, Cody, we project him kind of as a starter right now because the Broncos really don't have a third starter on the defensive line. 2 years, up to $8 million for Malcolm Roach, but he's never really been a full-time starter before. The Broncos are banking on him maintaining that level of efficiency with increased snaps. Kind of, I mean, it's not quite the same limb they went on with DJ Jones a couple of years ago, but it was kind of a similar situation, right? Where he's super productive, playing part-time role. You feel like he can maintain that level of effectiveness on a per snap basis because, look, like you said, this team desperately needed run stop help. 30th in the NFL last year in run defense, 32nd in yards per carry allowed. I mean, Roach, he's not going to be able to do it by himself, but hopefully, like we've talked about in the past, you need guys that can go out there and protect those linebackers. And at this point that we're recording, we actually don't know who the linebackers are going to be. It's Alex Singleton and somebody else to be determined, but this is a much needed move for the Broncos to start building the trenches up front defensively.
Well, and I think another aspect that we had talked about is, you know, you and I were saying, okay, highlighting what the Broncos need. Do they need a guy that can go out there and play in the A gap and rush the passer? When you look at Roach's overall body of work, he doesn't have a lot of quarterback hits, doesn't necessarily have a lot of quarterback pressures. But to the point that you made there, if the Broncos feel like, and I feel like this is a fair evaluation, if the Broncos feel like they have a guy who could just anchor, right? Anchor there in that defensive tackle position, hold their own in the A gap and create penetration, at least in terms of the run gaps and stopping them, not necessarily rushing the passer, then they believe that they can get favorable matchups on the outside with guys like Baron Browning, Jonathan Cooper, Nick Bonito, Drew Sanders, whatever else they decide to potentially do at the outside linebacker position. But then it also, I think, benefits when you look at DJ Jones, who, as the time that we have recorded this episode, is still on the roster there. This means that Roach would be the defensive tackle, DJ Jones would be the starting defensive end, and Zach Allen would be the other starting defensive end for the Broncos. Then you factor in some of the young guys that they do have right now in the defensive line in the rotation behind them. Matt Henningsen entering a crucial year for him. I think he's been a solid role player there, but I don't feel like he's ready to take over a starting role here. And I know there's a lot of conversation. Like I was getting into some discussion on Twitter about DJ Jones. A lot of people want him to be cut because, oh, hey, another $10 million. Financially would be nice, but I just don't see George Paton cutting a player on an area where he perceives to be the biggest weakness when that player is one of your better players at your biggest area of weakness. So adding, I think, a guy like Roach to the mix here, it boosts the Broncos defensive line. They're getting a young player they believe is ascending and can have a big impact And this is something that maybe after next season, if it proves to be a great value for them, maybe they look at extending him. Maybe they look at other options. But Denver has to continue, I think, to bolster the trenches here. And so I think this maybe poses a little bit of an interesting question. In your opinion, do you think the Broncos are done on the defensive line in free agency, or do you also think they may look in the NFL draft this year too?
I don't think they're done, Cody. I have to point out as well, I think you just dropped the first great value of NFL free agency so far. So I think we gotta applaud ourselves. We made it at least a couple of days.
It was hard not to.
I know, right? They're going to continue coming as well. And hopefully on the defensive line, honestly, I hope the Broncos aren't done here. And I think as we sit here recording this, like it's not even the new NFL league year yet. So we could be still seeing the Broncos with a lot of stuff in the works on the defensive line. And I think that they need to have depth. You need to be able to bring pass rush in waves. You need to be able to rotate guys in and out. I mean, if a guy like Malcolm Roach was so effective on 290 snaps, what are you projecting? Are you projecting 400 snaps? Are you projecting 500 snaps? Even if you project 500, you're going to need rotational pieces. And as of right now, the Broncos just don't have enough NFL-ready bodies on the defensive line to be able to rotate. I mean, Matt Henningsen, Yoma Uwazurike is potentially back this year, but not till almost training camp. So we don't think he's even really going to be a factor. It's one of the, I guess we have Rashard Lawrence as well. We haven't talked much about him, the guy, the Broncos, former 4th-round pick of the Cardinals, played for Vance Joseph, and he's got some experience as well. So he's an interesting kind of wild card option, but hopefully some more pieces, because you want to be able to bring these guys in waves. You want to have depth. Look at the Cleveland Browns last year. They signed a couple of guys in free agency, Maurice Hurst, Shelby Harris. They had Jordan Elliott. You've got a number of other guys on the D-line. You're able to rotate probably 5 or 6 guys that are capable of playing extensive snaps. The Broncos kind of need that. So I hope they're not done adding to the defensive line. And I don't think signing a guy like Roach indicates that they are.
Well, and then they also have some young guys on the roster going into next season as well. Elijah Garcia, who made the roster last year, and they also still have Jordan Jackson in the mix as well, former New Orleans Saint. Not necessarily Texas Longhorn ties there, but those who get it will get it. I mean, I feel like it's interesting. Like the Broncos have really made a run this offseason on former Longhorns, which maybe that's the strategy for them going forward. Texas forever 6. But anyways, on top of that, though, we're going to take a look at some other options here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Denver, over the last couple of days, they've created more salary cap space, especially restructuring 2 players they signed to free agent deals last offseason. What might that mean for the Broncos? Is there a strategy behind it? We'll break all that down here on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at the GameTime app. And if you've ever had a frustrating ticket buying experience where you went to go buy tickets to one of the events that you wanted to go to at the last minute, but then you realize, hey, the prices are too high or they're simply out of stock, GameTime actually has you covered with a lot of great deals that can get you closer to the action, even if the event has already started and you want to buy a last-minute ticket. That's what I like about GameTime, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. GameTime, they are obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. GameTime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. With zone deals, you pick the section and GameTime picks the seats for big-time savings. And the GameTime guarantee means that you'll always get the best price. And if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
A couple more contract restructures, and the Broncos all of a sudden have $20 million more cap space available. They've bumped into the top 10 of the entire NFL in terms of available cap space. What the heck are Sean Payton and George Paton scheming? We're going to talk about what this could all mean as the Broncos have restructured Zach Allen and Ben Powers contracts on today's episode of Locked On Broncos. But want to say thank you and give a shout out to every single one of you that makes Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day. every single day, free and available everywhere that you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, where, man, stay subscribed, lock in, tune in every single day, and hit that notification bell, because you know what? The Broncos, they're unpredictable. Cody and I could finish recording an episode and something else comes up. So you're going to need that next episode of Locked On Broncos at the top of your queue there on YouTube. So tune in every single day and stay locked in on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Cody, let's talk about these contract restructures. We talked about this in a previous episode, that maybe the Broncos didn't want to kick the can down into the future with guys like Ben Powers and Zach Allen, because it would load up the salary cap in future years, where potentially next offseason you could have Russell Wilson on the books for over, I think it's 46 million, or it's close to 50 million. So we've kind of just been rounding up. But here's the deal. You kick the can down the road now. So what does this mean for the Broncos? I mean, what are they doing here, adding all this additional cap space?
I mean, basically what the contracts indicate, especially with Zach Allen and Ben Powers, is that they've added void years to the deals. So essentially, to my understanding, that means later on down the road, like if Denver were to move on, there's dead cap on them. Like there would be a dead cap incurrence if they were no longer on the roster, I think after 1 or 2 more years here in Denver. For me, I feel like, where do you go? Like if you had to flip a coin, if you're going to take on the biggest part of the dead cap now, what flexibility does it give you next year? I don't know if we know the exact number, what that may look like. And obviously the NFL salary cap changes on a year-to-year basis. We've seen the mega $30 million increase this year. And even though that was the case, like the Broncos, as the time that you and I sat down to record this episode on Tuesday, this airs Thursday, obviously wherever you get your podcast, airs a day earlier on Wednesday on YouTube. But for me, it's like, okay, you look at this, Denver at the time of recording this is 9th in overall cap space. Like they were in an ugly situation before everything began. They were over the cap, and now they have a lot of flexibility, over $40+ million to work with. So the question is, do you go and invest and add pieces to your roster right now in free agency and have some room left over, obviously, for the NFL draft, which you're going to need that for this year's upcoming draft class? Or do you take on the largest portion of Russell Wilson's dead cap this year and then have a little bit more breathing room next year? This is where I'm split, right? I feel like Denver right now, there's still some guys maybe they need to take care of, maybe some guys they need to add in terms of depth pieces. We're seeing contracts. I don't think guys are really being priced out too high unless they're starting caliber players. And right now, Denver doesn't necessarily need a lot of starters on this team. Look, we're going to talk about quarterback. That's a different situation. But Denver, for the most part, is set in terms of who their starters are this upcoming season. So depth pieces aren't going to cost you as much. In my opinion, this is the time to probably take the biggest part of that Russell Wilson dead cap. And I saw our good friend Andrew Mason put out that if Denver were to do that, it would cut into about 18 million of Denver space right now. So let's say 42 million right now. You cut 18 into that. Okay, you still have good operating room to sign a rookie class this year, maybe add a couple of depth pieces, and there still could be some deals that happen from restructuring or even an extension.
And I think one thing that we need to consider as well with this is the fact of, man, the Broncos getting that rookie quarterback contract potentially. And we talked about this before, but it could be kind of derailed by having the biggest portion of Russell's deal on the books next year. I mean, you want to have the benefits of that rookie quarterback contract. So you're missing out on that for 2 seasons at this point. And that's just the reality of the situation. Cody, to be honest with you, I've never heard of a team being able to like pick which cap hit they want from the post June 1st release designation. I've never known that was a possibility ever. So I'm just as shocked as anyone that the Broncos can choose between the two, as opposed to saying, well, no, this is what it is this year, this is what it is next year. I'm kind of baffled by that whole situation, but I get where I kind of land. I'll play devil's advocate a little bit. I kind of land with a lot of the fans that want to see the team be active, because if you're planning on drafting a quarterback, look, you want to have the most competent roster possible around that guy. I realize there's cap implications from Russell Wilson. I realize there's this whole situation with, well, you want to eat the dead money now, and you're going to be bad this year anyway, so just eat it. It's like, if you're planning on being bad in 2024 and also drafting a first round quarterback, like, what sense does that make? I don't get that at all. I don't get that line of thinking. It's like, if you're drafting a quarterback in the first round, you better be planning on him being the CJ Stroud of this year's NFL. And I know that may not be realistic, but from a team perspective, like if you're Sean Payton and George Payton and you're sitting there saying, we believe that we can get our guy in the first round of the NFL draft, whether we have to trade up, whether he comes to 12, whether we're able to trade back and still get him. We believe that we can get our franchise quarterback. If you believe that truly, if you honestly believe that, you better be going out and believing that that guy is going to be able to lead this team right away. And that may not be the most realistic thing, but that's just the way that it is. You need to set this team up for that quarterback to have success. And if you're not willing to do that because of Russell Wilson's deal, then why did you cut him in the first place? Why not? I mean, there's so many other questions that could come up with that, but I think you need to go out in free agency and get some guys that can help you win and help your team be good, because a young quarterback deserves that kind of stability.
Well, let me ask you this then, right? To kind of go on your point, if Denver's going to become big spenders with this added cap space that they do have, what position are you looking to spend big on, considering, you know, the starters and where Denver's currently at right now?
That's a great question, isn't it? Because it's like, you look at free agency, the best players available, they still remain at, you know, safety is one of the positions. The wide receiver market hasn't moved. Tight end is not looking great for the Broncos at this point. So, I mean, maybe you focus on the defensive trenches. I said this on a previous podcast that we did, Cody, but the best thing that you can do for a young quarterback is give him a defense that can have his back. We saw how beneficial it was last year for Russell Wilson to have all those extra possessions. How much more was that going to benefit a rookie quarterback to know that you can go out there and you can make mistakes and afford to fail forward? I think invest in the defense. Go get a Danielle Hunter, go get a Sheldon Rankins, go get the defensive linemen and then the pass rushers that can make this, that can raise the floor of this defense. Because if you raise the floor of this defense, man, the Broncos won 8 games last season and they were in the playoff mix, 1 game out of first place with a bottom 5 passing offense for most of the year, bottom 10 at best. If they can raise the floor defensively, man, you can take some lumps with a rookie and still be competitive next season.
Broncos country, what path would you like to take? Would you like the Broncos to take on the biggest hit of the dead cap of Russell Wilson in 2024, or would you like them to go out and invest in some big spending in NFL free agency? If you're watching or listening to Locked On Broncos, let us know. But the Broncos did bring back one of their key free agents and a guy who has a very underrated role in today's NFL. Michael Burton is back. We talk about just how big and how important this move is for Sean Payton and the Broncos offense. You're going to get that much more here on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA and with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Once again, that's Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% match on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC member SIPC is a registered broker-dealer. The Broncos brought back one of their key offseason free agents in a role that is often overlooked in today's NFL. Michael Burton is back. But before we dive into that, what it means and what the Broncos could be doing going forward, we also want to say thank you so much to everybody in Broncos country for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day every single day. Thank you so much, Broncos country. You make the show exactly what it is. The offseason is busy. Free agency is busy. We've had a lot of bonus episodes going out. So if you've missed some of the other episodes here in Locked On Broncos, make sure you go back wherever you get your podcast or on YouTube and watch all the episodes where we break down some of the things that the Broncos were in on, they're out on. What's next? What other moves could they be making? It is a busy time over here on the podcast, and we're so grateful to have you along for the ride. I know that word brings back bad memories here for Broncos country, but we are on the Rocky Mountain roller coaster. And one thing that I think provides a little bit of stability here for Denver when things are a little bit rocky, a reliable fullback option. Michael Burton, obviously back with the Broncos here on a 1-year deal. This happened on Tuesday. In your opinion, Sayre, we talk so much about how important it is to be able to dominate inside the trenches, right? Whether you're on the offensive line, it's about dominating the defensive line, opening things up, opening gaps up for your running backs to find daylight. Michael Burton, well, last year in 2023, as bad as the Broncos offense was at times, Michael Burton was always a consistent bright spot for them, not only on offense, but also on special teams.
He was. And so you bring a guy like that back, and you need to have guys like that on your 53. I mean, when you can have this kind of quality player on your 53-man roster, Cody, I think it just elevates everything else that you're capable of doing. And I've seen a lot of people who, I mean, I like to watch film. I like to break things down, but some people have dissected the impact that Burton has had a little more in depth than I have. And I think it seems like all of the reviews are positive. And obviously you want to have a guy like this who can help your running game. We didn't really see the Broncos running game take off quite like we hoped it would in 2023, but you got to trust in this process, right? And Burton is part of that process. So when you talk about his value to the offense, to special teams, especially when the special teams was finally good last year for the Broncos, you don't really want to get in the way of that. And quite frankly, I mean, what you re-signed Burton for, it may not even count against your top 51 contracts here as we approach. When you have a 90-man roster in the NFL, your salary cap only accounts for the top 51. I mean, Burton's deal, Cody, it may not even count against those top 51. So he's a guy that you can have on your 90-man roster, a low price. He makes quality impact in multiple phases. I think it's a good move for the Broncos.
Well, I want to ask you this as well. You know, the Broncos had Nate Atkins get a roster spot on the 53-man roster. We didn't see him play too much, but his main role was kind of playing that fullback. And look, Nate was a guy that when the Broncos had rookie minicamp and they also had tryouts for other players, like Nate Atkins was the one guy outside of the, the rookie draft class that we were all talking about that I had my eye on that stood out, that made a noticeable difference. Now, the question is, like, with Burton coming back on a one-year deal, is this an indication of Nate Atkins? Like, is he, in your opinion, going to be a guy that's going to be a roster lock going into 2024? I don't necessarily believe that's the case. I think Michael Burton, it's his job. And there was nothing I don't think that Nate Atkins can do to kind of upend him. And I think them bringing Burton back kind of signifies that. But then also, that Atkins plays that hybrid role of the tight end. In my opinion, you and I've had this discussion as well. Denver's tight end position is not looking good right now for where they're at and for maybe what they need in terms of improving on the offense. So how does this impact maybe a young guy like Nate Atkins, in your opinion?
I think it's hugely impactful, not only Burton returning, but also I think Lucas Krull kind of having a little bit of an emergence late last season, right? With him coming into the mix and being an option, a more high upside option in the passing game for sure. I think the combination of those two guys really doesn't look good for a guy like Nate Atkins. He's going to need to come out there and make a lot of plays in training camp and preseason games and show like, man, you can't cut this guy, right? And I think that's kind of where the Broncos are with this 53-man roster. You have to kind of make tough decisions like that. You can't compromise. Well, this is just it's a great story. Atkins was so versatile and valuable to South Carolina, and we believe that he can do this. If he's not contributing and making an impact, the 53-man roster has to get better this year, not worse. And so if he's not progressing, if he's not making plays, Cody, I think you're absolutely onto something. Burton and the combination of him and Lucas Krull, that could spell the end for a guy like Nate Atkins.
When we talk about where Denver's had to get better in the last couple of years, we talked about special teams, right? And I think under Mike Westhoff, Ben Kotwika last year, my goodness, did they take a step forward in the right direction? And ideally, you want guys like in the Atkins role to be able to play special teams, but Burton was a core 4 special teams guy and was one of their best overall players. Look, you have Tremont Smith, you had Justin Sternad, you also had Delarian Turner-Yell, and then Michael Burton. Like, these guys all graded out very highly for Denver special teams unit last season. Throw in Riley Moss, who really emerged late as a special teams guy. Drew Sanders. Like, your special teams unit for the most part should consist of young guys and a couple of veteran aces. And I think with Burton coming back to the fold, I think this is a good storm for Denver to continue to build continuity there. Obviously, we all know Will Lutz returned to the Denver Broncos after spurning the Jacksonville Jaguars. Initially reported it was going to be a 3-year deal. He decides to go to Denver on a 2-year deal. Sean Payton called him and said, "What the hell, Will? I got rid of a draft pick just to get you next year. Now you're going to go to Jacksonville and upend Brandon McManus." I don't think that's necessarily the conversation that happened. That's just us being funny here. But Denver got better in an area. And look, special teams helped them win games last year. Remember, we were talking about how many times or how many years have we been on the show saying, wow, if Denver's just better in the special teams in this game, like it's a win for the Broncos. Instead, it's the reason that they lost the game. Didn't have that vibe last year for Denver at all on the special team side of things. Their kick coverage was good. We all know that the NFL is now looking at maybe embracing and trying the XFL kickoff style because owners were not happy at the amount of touchbacks that were going on last season in the league. I think this is a big development, obviously keeping your special teams core intact for the most part.
Gotta have it. You have to have it. And especially when you look at some of the other free agents that could potentially be leaving Denver this offseason, Cody. I mean, Justin Sternad, he may not be back. And then, of course, there's kind of just this with a guy like, Justin Simmons leaving. It brings PJ Locke and Caden Stearns up into the fold defensively. So you're already having to kind of reshuffle and rotate on special teams. You want to keep as much continuity as possible. Delarian Turner-Yell injured. There's going to be a lot of shifting, a lot of changing on that unit anyway. So as many guys as you can bring back, it's for the better. And I think obviously we could also be looking at the Broncos getting a new return specialist. If Marvin Mims, Cody, if he's going to play more role on offense, he's probably not going to be out there returning kicks and punts as much. So there could be a lot of Jaleel. Hey, I mean, you never know. You never know. The Joker, he's supposed to be able to do it all, right? So a lot of shuffling on special teams as it is. Don't want to lose guys like this that can really upgrade your entire unit.
And maybe Philip Dorsett too, because he's still on the Broncos roster. Maybe he could be the guy that takes over as the return guy. And I feel like ideally for what Marvin's role is going to be on the offense, you need to have a guy behind him that can do the things that he does. Philip's got good speed, really good speed. If we're being honest with you, put him at that kick return, punt return role there, or maybe have Jaleel return punts and then obviously have Philip return kicks, whatever you may have, or even Jaleel. Like I'm excited. I want to see Jaleel return. If the NFL embraces this new XFL style of kickoff, I would love to see Jaleel out there because he's got really good ball carrier vision. He's got good speed. And I'm very curious to see how special teams coordinators try to teach that level of blocking where you're closer to the guys that are going to be running downfield to try to tackle your guy. But it's also a safer approach to the game, which I think, Sayre, can add more excitement to the NFL and to obviously games that are going forth here into 2024, maybe even beyond here. We'll see what the Broncos, we'll see what the NFL decides to come up with from a schematic standpoint as pertains to kickoffs and returns going forward here. But Broncos country, what are your thoughts on Michael Burton returning to the Broncos on a one-year deal? What type of impact do you think that has? If you're watching, listening to Lockdown Broncos, let us know how you feel. More NFL free agency stuff is coming your way this week. The Broncos could be busy. They could stand pat, but we're going to figure out a better idea what Sean Payton and George Paton's philosophy is going to be as we inch one step closer through free agency toward the NFL draft. You can get all that and much more in tomorrow's brand new episode, Lockdown Broncos.